right, so today's video is going to be, there's going to be a comparison between the R5 and the R6 Mark II, and also we're going to go ahead and talk about the three things that we're going to be testing today, which is the 4K resolution. We're going to test out the low light performance, and then also we're going to test out the autofocus tracking when it comes to subjects that are far away. And I also wanted to say thank you for those that like and subscribe to my channel. I definitely appreciate the support that allows me to make these kind of videos for you guys, and I would appreciate if you keep supporting me. There are more tests coming up, so be on the lookout for those. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing I want to touch bases that I was able to find out about these two cameras, okay? Actually, particularly one, and that would be the pixel binning. Okay, there's pixel binning going on here. So, what is pixel binning? First of all, so I'm going to pull a chart here for you guys. So, as you can see on the far right here, you can see how the image quality is when you're using the normal sensor. It's utilizing everything, so you get more detail. But if you bend those pixels, and you put them, a 2x2 or a 4x4, the more you bin or compress these pixels into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and that's when you start losing a lot of quality. And I was able to find out basically when I zoomed in 400% on a map of the United States, and I just focus on a state like California, for example. And if you look to the far left, the R5, it's not as sharp and 4K 60 IPB compared to the R6 Mark II 4K 60 IPB. Why? Because there is no pixel binning going on the R6 Mark II. The R6 Mark II is utilizing that full sensor. I thought to myself, this does oversample 6K, and then the R5 does oversample 8K. So what can we find out here, right? So I switched over to the 4K HQ mode, okay? And let's look at those results and compare them. So now you can see on the far left, the Canon R5 oversample 8K versus the R6 Mark II on the far right with its oversample 6K. Can you tell the difference between an 8K oversample and a 6K oversample? There you go. Those are the 4K results as far as resolution goes. Now, let's talk about frame rates. Let's talk about those frame rates, the high frame rates. Okay, so the R5 can go 4K 120. R6 Mark II can only do 1080 at 120 frames per second. So here's those results. Now, I was able to play with a towel, or just throw up a towel, just to throw it off to see if it goes out of focus, even for just a split moment. It didn't. The quality just looks pretty close to the 4K 120, but I wouldn't say exactly. And it's really good. It's really good. It's really impressed me to know that the R6 Mark II can do such a thing. Why? Because it has a new sensor on there. So we're talking about a 2-year-old sensor on the R5 already. So what about the R6 for 180 frames per second? Now, I was in my basement with some lights over my head, and sometimes you'll see a flicker, right? But it's 180 frames per second. Normally, you're not just going to shoot where I'm going to be shooting at. So you won't have those information, those flickers. But however, if you're shooting outside, for example, this tree, I was able to shoot at 180 frames per second, zoomed in. Still really good quality. So I would not say that the 180 frames per second is a dud. I would not. It's really good at what it does and utilizing that full frame. 3,899 brand new. 2,499 brand new. And you think to yourself, well, it's a $1,400 difference. But do I really need the 8K? Only reason, as a wedding videographer, I got the R5 was because the overheating was mostly resolved. And I was just shooting 4K 60 during the summer. Guess what? It would not overheat. Did I care about pixel binning at that moment? Not really. It produced really good sharp images, but not as sharper as the R6 can. So those are my conclusions for that. Now, let's move on to low light performance. Starting off with the R5. Now, starting off at 1600, 2000, and then moving on all the way to 10,000 ISO. You start to notice it between 4,000 to 6,000 ISO, and this was a pretty dark room because I wanted to push it, depending on your environment, your situation, right? You can push it maybe a little bit further. But on the R6 Mark II, and if we take a look at those results, I was able to push it all the way as well to 10,000. And surprisingly enough, less noise. Not a surprise because we're talking about a 24 megapixel versus a 45 megapixel camera. It does well in low light, as I remember it from my first R6 that I've owned. And that, from the R6 to the R6 Mark II, not much of a huge difference of an upgrade, besides being the sensor and the record limit, right? And the tracking. And there are furthermore tests on the R6 Mark II coming up. So remember that. This is one of many videos. So now let's talk about the last thing, which is the tracking on the R6. So I wanted to test out, see how far back I can go, and to when can it actually track my eye. Because autofocus, eye tracking was enabled, and it did a really good job, really good job. Now, why do I care about that? Why, as a wedding videographer, would care about that? Well, there's a send-off, right? There's the bride and her father walking down the aisle. They're a distance away from you. But if you can focus on that far away of a distance as they come closer, wherever their pace may be, right? R6 Mark II can track that pretty darn well. It would stick. R5 does well too. That's what I come to find out. But not as good as the R6 Mark II will. So sometimes you'll have focus bleeding, or it'll be out of focus because there are so many other faces around. But the R6 Mark II can track that and stick to it. No pixel binning, so oversample 6K, sharp pictures, you saw that. Low light performance, really good, on par with the R6, obviously. 4 megapixels extra on top of the 20 megapixels from the original, not much of a difference. And then the tracking, really good. Now, there are more tests. There's still overheating tests, battery life tests with the battery grip. You can see it right there. IBIS tests coming up. I'm still working on those, so that video will be published soon too. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. But I hope that you learned something about these two cameras and the differences. Technology will evolve. More features will start evolving that appeal to us content creators and videographers, right? So it's almost, I would even say, the perfect hybrid for what we need. Because the battery life is exceptional. And you'll see those results coming up. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this test. Stay tuned for more tests, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.